Hey, y'all, I'm back. I just wanted to make a quick tutorial about the question that arose at the end, and that is about using a map from ArcGIS. I'm not logged in on purpose, just so that we have something that anybody can do with this type of technology. And hypothetically, you could do this with Google Maps as well. But you'll see here, I just created a map demo folder on my desktop. I am running a PC. So, if you are on Mac, that's fine. Just anytime I say control, switch it with command, the Apple key, and you'll be good for most cases. I'm at just ArcGIS, and I went to the base map and activated. I'm here at Detroit because I think that's where we were trying to focus on, and I'm just using the community map sort of filter here. And really what I'm going to try to do here, I'm going to X out of this so I have more screen real estate, is just take a very basic, understanding for concept design. And I'll use the snipping tool, which you can activate on a Windows 10 machine if you just do a Cortana search for snipping or I think Snip and Sketch is a new one. If you're working on a Mac, you have the same thing. I think it's Apple Shift and 3 or 4. So one of those two will get either, you can draw it or you can just capture the whole screen and it's just put onto your clipboard. So this one's a little bit, I think there's other ways to do it on a Mac too. I just am out of practice. So we'll do it here. So I'll just, in the Snip and Sketch, I'll choose new, and then I'll just grab this whole big area like this. I'm not going to use everything here, but then I'll just save it out under the map demo. And here is my map. Okay. So the important thing here is that this is a dependent file. So that's the point that I wanted to make for you guys. Let me get this open here. There we go. So our After Effects project will go inside of here as well. So let me just do that while we're talking about it. So I'll do File, Save As, and save this directly into there. So I'll go to the desktop here underneath my map demo. And I'll just call this. Right, so what we should see is a demo AEP file as well as the map folder. And they're both within this folder called map demo, which is on the desktop. So the important part here is when we're about to bring this PNG file into the After Effects file, that there is a link there that is dynamic. So After Effects does not hold this map file into the interface. So let me just demonstrate that. I'm going to start off with a new composition here. And we'll just keep the defaults that we were working with, 1920 by 1080 at 24 frames per second, 10 seconds, and the background color is irrelevant. And I have my composition there, which now opens down here. So the other one is the map. So this is something I'm going to import into the After Effects file, but it is just a link. So if I click and drag this into here, you can see it populate here. I can also right-click anywhere inside of here, choose Import and File, or hit Control-I on my keyboard or Command-I if you're on a Mac, and then navigate to the file to get it there. Okay. So once it's in there, this file is actually looking for the file path for this actual location. And it's going to that folder and it's saying, hey, anybody here called map.png? And it will say, yes, I am it, right? And then it will source it into After Effects. If this changes at all, if I take this file out of this folder, rename this file, that link will break and it won't be able to find it. So it's very important that you put all of the files, the dependent files, into the same folder and then import them once they're all aggregated in that spot. Great, so let's integrate it here. So I'll bring the map like that. And maybe I want to scale this. So same sort of thing like we talked about before. So maybe I want to start here. So position the playhead, adjust the object, lay down a keyframe, and then I'll move forward in time and I want to scale it up. Actually, I'm going to add in position there. So just hit Shift P to open that up rather than twirling it out. And then 1 second later, I want to scale it up and then just move it over so we can really see this area right here for whatever reason. Okay, so we get sort of this zoom in effect. Now this can be a little disconcerting just because it feels very linear, right? So if I play this out, right, it feels like whoosh, which is a little much. So I'm just going to jump into this graph editor and grab these two and choose ease in, ease out. Okay, and I'll do the same for scale. So click and drag, ease in, ease out. And you can see how it's no longer linearly interpolating there. It's not just jutting out. It's easing out of that transition and then easing into it. We can see that the keyframes have changed at this time. I could also highlight these and hit F9 on my keyboard, or right click and choose ease in, ease out right here. So right click after you select all of them. Great, so now we have sort of this motion like this. And then at this moment in time, I want to, let's say, highlight this section and then highlight this section and color them 2 different spots and maybe add some text inside of here. So that's my whole goal that I'm trying to do. So great, so I'll do it in 2 different ways here. I'll use the rectangle tool just to start out. And as I select that, you can see that this fill has opened and it's this garish yellow color. So I can click once on that to activate whatever color I would like. So let me source this sort of orange color here and then just brighten it up. And maybe, yeah, we'll go pretty bright on that. So as the important thing that you want to note here is that the map layer is not selected. So see how it has a little highlight here? I'm going to click once in the empty space down here to deselect that. And then you'll notice that the icon is a little crosshair with a star. So if it doesn't have a star, you see it has a little box with a black circle in it, then it's actually going to create a mask. So if I start to do that, what you'll see is this. So if that happens to you, just hit Control Z to undo it and get rid of it. And then make sure you deselect before clicking and dragging. So this is not the greatest shape that we're working for, but we'll work with the pen tool in just a second and make a custom shape. So as soon as I make that shape, I can see it up here at the top, and I'll just select this, tap enter, and call this rectangle orange. Okay, so I know what it is. And I can see that that anchor point is off here to the side. So I'm going to hold down Control and double click on the pan behind or anchor point tool, which will center the anchor point in the positive content of the layer. And then I'll switch over to the selection tool to move this around and maybe rotate it. I almost did the hotkey. So W is the hotkey. I could also select this and tap R for rotation and rotate that, or twirl this out and find rotation and twirl it like this. It's really hard to see through that, and most students would kind of move towards opacity, but you can sort of get a washed out feeling for this. So I'm going to keep that opacity at 100 and actually adjust the blending mode here. If you don't see the blending mode, no problem. What we can do here is right next to either source name or layer name, whichever one you have highlighted there, right click in that empty space, choose columns, and come over here to modes. Sorry, that would happen quickly. There you go. Okay, so that should be active. And we'll see that currently it's a normal blending mode. There's also this track map position, which we're not going to look at today, but you'll notice that the first layer does not have a track map. The second one does. And that's fine. So underneath mode, I'm going to change that normal. We have a whole bunch of different, blending modes here. I'm just going to jump to multiply. Okay. I can also, it's sort of annoying if you're just, learning this, to click on this and then go to this one and then click on this and go to this one and try to find the one that works for you. The hotkey is where it's at. So what I want to do here, I have to watch my hands do it. Hold on. There we go. Is it Control? No. I thought it was Shift and Shift plus. I'm one layer down. So Shift minus and Shift plus will go through that layer. So notice here, I'll be on normal for a second, and Shift plus, right, will go down the list like this, and then go over to here. And then once it gets down to here, it will loop back around to normal. So you can also go backwards. So here I am on darken. 1 minus is dancing dissolve. So I'll hit Shift and minus, and it will go to that dancing dissolve. So that's the fastest way to avoid that flyout. So Shift and plus, and just kind of toggle through till you find the visual that you're looking for. I'm going to hit on multiply because it's probably the most common that you see for many different reasons. And this will allow me to, try to customize that shape as far as scale and rotation. I'll tap W and just kind of rotate that a little bit. And then V for position, and position that over here. Scale too, right? So I was just using this for that scale property. But this, most of the time you don't have something that's like perfectly rectangular like this. So maybe it works for you, maybe it doesn't, but we can use that blending mode to work with that. And we also notice as I start off in the beginning, but this is not where I want it, right? So we want it to kind of pop in once we get to about here. So first off, this layer, we can see this block of content. I'll color this one orange, okay? And I don't need it in the beginning, right? We can see the positive content here. So I'm just gonna click and drag that over. And you'll see here that anytime prior to that, it just doesn't exist. The first time it's allowed to exist is when the color bar starts. Okay, so great. So at this moment in time, I want it to be there. So I will grab the scale property here, position the playhead, adjust the object, lay down a keyframe, and then come to the beginning and tap that out at 0. Okay, so it will start at 0, at nothing, right? And then it will scale up to make that area highlighted. So great, that's a rectangle. And then, I can obviously animate it out. So if I want it to be there on screen, and then I want it to just disappear, right? I just wanted to cut it out. I could do the same thing with the end here. So hover over the end where you get that black arrow in either direction, and just click and drag it like that. I'm going to use the hotkey because it's a lot easier. So position the playhead where you want to chop it. Alt and the right bracket key sort of looks like the end of the layer, and then the Alt and the right bracket key or left bracket key will trim the beginning. Okay, so they sort of look, and they're next to each other. So it sort of looks like what you're trying to do, which is great. So now we can see that it's going to die, right? There's no more opportunity. There's no transition. It just stops. So I can also animate this out, right? So position the playhead, right? I want it to remain the same. Adjust the object. I don't want to make an adjustment. I want it to stay at its current position, lay down a keyframe. And then at this moment in time, it goes back down to 0. So I'm just going to copy and paste this one over. So Control C, Control V, and out it goes. Right. So if I hit play, we can zoom in. We have it bump up and then bump back. Okay. And we can expand that. So maybe I'm like, ooh, that's fast, right? And I want it to go to 6 seconds. So notice how I've expanded the time, but I haven't changed the animation. So I would have to click and drag these keyframes and move them over in order for it to be replicated in that extension. So boom, hang out, hang out, hang out, animate out, and then it's done. Okay, so yeah, that'll work, right? But it's probably not the best form that I want. So I'm gonna draw it with the pen tool. Now the pen tool is right next door to the rectangle tool. It's this one right here. And again, it does the same behavior. So if we have something selected, I'll address the map at this time, and we hover over that with the pen tool, you'll notice that white box with the black circle in the middle. This is going to create a mask, and very similar to a Halloween mask, it's sort of like covering your face, right? So it's going to cover an object or reveal a certain aspect of an object. We're not covering that. So we just want to make sure that nothing is selected at this time. So I'm going to click once in empty space down here, and then we can see the little star, which is what we want. So here, this is where it gets a little bit more flexible. So instead of having a perfect rectangle like this, I want to create a shape that kind of mimics what I see here. Now we can go all day, and I'll sort of make this a little bit bigger. Let's try to make this shape. Okay, so I can click once here, go to the other edge, click once, click once, click once, click once, click once, and notice how I'm ending my clicks where I began. So as I hover over that final, or I guess the first click, we see this little circle in the lower right-hand corner of my pen tool. This is telling me that I'm about to enclose the shape, fence it in, so that After Effects knows what's the inside of the shape and what's the outside of the shape. So that's really important to do. So make sure you enclose your shape by clicking, where you began, right? Ending where you began. It's very philosophical in that way. So now we have a shape that's enclosed. And we can see that shape layer here. I'll rename it this time. We'll call this funky shape. And we'll color this one blue. Okay. And I just clicking on the little shape there, and I'll change it to whatever color I want. And again, maybe using a blue that's in here, shifting the hue a little bit. So it's sort of in line with what exists on the screen. And I don't have to kind of recreate the wheel or just to kind of stab in the dark with those. Same thing, I'll adjust the layering to multiply. This one doesn't look like it changes a whole lot because there's really nothing behind it. Okay, but you can see how it does have that change. Okay. Now, this is important because this can show, like maybe we have somebody in this neighborhood and then they expand over to include this neighborhood. Okay, so you start off with a really funky shape and then you end up with a really funky shape. So great, let's do that. So I'm going to move, whereas, it's not just a simple scale. I could, right? So I could do the same thing here. Maybe it happens at the same time. And we have that same scale property, start it here, bump it up to here. Oh, I didn't change my anchor point location. So see how it's down here and it's sort of scaled up in crazy directions. So no problem. I'll select that layer. Let me get rid of the scale property here for a second. I'll select that layer, hold down Control, and double click on the pan behind tool, the anchor point tool, so that we'll center it in the positive content. See how it's sort of strange? We can also move that. Right? Maybe I want it to be, I have snapping on. Maybe I want it to be a little bit more in the middle of this chunky section right here. Cool. Now if we try to scale it, so position the playhead. So it starts off here, right? And then we start it off at 0. And I want to include position, so Shift P to bring up that channel. And I'll keep that in the same position. Right, so it scales up, it hits its mark. Maybe some time passes, right? So that we say, yep, in 2005, it was this neighborhood, and then 2006 will happen at 4 seconds. So we want at this moment in time for that scale to increase, right? And this is where we have that problem, right? So let's say it stops at this road, but we can see that the shape extends beyond that, right? And it also is supposed to include, this section, but it's just short of that, right? So there are different challenges that you might have with this custom shape. No problem, we can animate it. So let me undo it. So we're back to the sort of 100 level, right? So it scales up, scale up, hits its mark, hangs out there for a second, and then we want it to be at its final location in this new orientation at second 4. So position the playhead. Now I need to adjust the object, but it's not one of these adjust the objects that we covered, right? Anchor point, scale, rotation, opacity, etc. It's actually part of the content. So where we went before to actually grab these little points, let me get under here for a second, on the shape. So I'm going to click on twirl out contents, twirl out shape. And really what's important here is the path. So the path is basically the outer extent of this shape. So at this moment in time, right back here, I want the path, the border, if you will, to be here. But then by second 4, I want it to be in different locations. Now you will see limitations on this this current one, and that's fine. We're going to deal with that. So let me position the playhead here and say, hey shape, right? Hey path, stick to where you are. Okay, so I've just animated that. Well, I've laid out a keyframe. I haven't animated yet. At second 4, position the playhead. Now I need to adjust the object. So I do have this path selected, and that's important. And I also have my selection tool active at this time. You'll notice that the little pen points that we dropped down, which are also confusingly called anchor points, but I'll call them pen points just to keep the two separate here, have little, they look like they're filled in, okay? So this is kind of important. So notice how when you select that word path, they all look like they're filled in. However, if I jump up to path 1 or shape 1, we notice that these little points become circles. They look like circles. So if I select shape 1, it looks like a circle, right? And if I select path 1, they look like empty squares. So either one of those, selecting shape 1 or path 1, will allow you to click and drag using the selection tool. Click and drag one of the points, make sure you're hovering directly over a point, and just click and drag it. Okay. You'll notice that a keyframe has automatically been laid down, and that's because it initiates a change based off of its last known location. Okay, so it's important that you sort of touch all of the keyframes that you want, all of the pinpoints that you want. So great, so position the playhead. Now I need to adjust the object, so I will select either shape 1 or path 1 and start to move those around. So with my selection tool active, I will click and drag on this one and put it to the extent there. Click and drag this one and maybe bring it to the shore. I'm holding down spacebar to temporarily activate the hand tool and clicking and dragging so I can get a little bit more space in my final section here. And then once I release that spacebar, I'm back to my selection tool. I'll hover over this one and bring it down like this, bringing it to the shore. But you'll notice that I do have a problem here, right? So this edge right here should kind of hug the shoreline, but it's a straight path. Don't worry about that right now. We'll get to that. Okay, and then same thing here. As I start to move this one, and I'm just going to give this one a little love, a little jiggle, because it didn't get touched, and we do want to try to make sure that we are intentional about all of the pen points. So the problem that I'm having here is that it's supposed to contain, let's say, this section right here, and I ran out of pen points, right? So it goes down to right about here, and it's supposed to come out and do that, right? And then also here, this shouldn't be really a straight line. This straight line works, and that straight line works, but not everything is a straight line. So great, so there are different things that I can change about this existing shape. This is getting a little bit more advanced, but you guys can handle it. So this goes back to my pen point, right? How I created this shape. If I knew that to begin with, sometimes it's better to work with the most complex shape and then sort of shrink it down. But in this case, we did the opposite, which is totally fine. So clicking and holding on that pen tool, I'm going to add this vertex tool. It has a little plus sign. Okay, and I'm just going to lay down some points here. So clicking once there, maybe 2 more, actually 3 more. So I'll do all of those. If I need more, I can always add them. And as you probably saw, I could also delete them. So let's deal with the addition of this section first, and then we'll deal with this very straight line here. So now that I've added them, I want to move them. I'm going to use my selection tool for that. So tapping V on my keyboard to activate the selection tool, or simply tapping on it here. I'll click and drag and keep moving those around. So this one is going to include that little portion, right? This one comes out to here, or I think this one was supposed to go down to the street. There we go. Oh no, I need one more. Hooray. So I'll just add one more right there. Switch over and bring that one out. So now we have an interesting problem. So we've created pen points on this keyframe. They did not exist on this keyframe. So let's see what happened. It tries to do its best in figuring out where it was between and then making that transition. So this is really nice because we didn't have to work with all of those, see how much they kind of collect right there. So this works out really, really nicely. After Effects is pretty smart like that. But there are some situations that maybe you don't want it to be extending and giving off false information. Like maybe it never touched this corner and it would be kind of false for you to scale it up in this fashion. So no problem, it's doing the best it can, right? So at that frame that's causing the problem, so the worst possible frame, let's adjust it. So this one, I want it to go out a little bit more. This one, I want it to stay in at this moment in time. So we're just trying to stay within, like maybe don't cross this until you get to here. Okay, so you can see how it automatically laid down a keyframe when I made those adjustments. Right, so we're scrubbing through here, and then we see it start to like wildly expand. Okay, and again, if you see a frame that you're like, it's not really great, I don't like that, no problem, just duck it down a little bit. And maybe we want these two to be out like this, and this one to come down. Right, so you're really just trying to work with that a little bit more. Okay. So great, and then the last little part here is the straight line. You hear my dog, I hope. He's groaning in the background. Great, so we have these straight lines that really don't look great. So let's adjust those. So same thing, behind the anchor point tool, we have this convert vertex tool. Now I could have done this in the start to create this with curves rather than straight lines, but we didn't because we're just learning. So I do want to make sure that I've positioned the playhead. I want to adjust the object. My goal here is to make this a little bit more curvy. And now I need to adjust it, right? So let me get a little bit closer to that. So I'll zoom in, hold down the spacebar tool to temporarily activate the hand tool, and click and drag to center that up in my viewport. I still have the convert anchor point tool active at this time. And I'm going to click and drag, right? And we'll see that it sort of turns that corner into a curve, which is exactly what we want. So I want it to curve like this, but we can also see that it's like really adjusting this side. I didn't really want it to do that, so I just want to click and drag that back to make that a little bit straighter. Or, maybe I want to include that portion right there. And I want to do the same thing. So I'm holding down spacebar to temporarily activate the hand tool, click and drag, and then click and drag this one over here. Okay. So once I have it where I want it, I can then adjust these tangent points. Okay. That one didn't quite make it. There we go. Cool. And now what we should see, if we scrub through, let me get back to the original here, right, is that it grows out like this. Now I'm scrubbing through this, so this is not in real time. So let's see what that looks like in real time. However, I don't want to play the whole thing, for 10 seconds. I just wanted to stop right here and analyze how this animation so far is going. So right here, I'm going to tap the N key to end this work area, which is this little section right here. I could also click and drag here and kind of cinch that in. It's just going to replay and replay over and over in this work area. So if you're working on an animation that's like from here to there, I could tap B for beginning, N for end, except not the E part. But it's easy enough, and they're right next to each other on the keyboard, so that's nice. Right, so let's hit play. And I kind of like the pace of that, but the one section kind of like juts out at the end. I'm not sure how much I like that, but it depends on the visuals that you're trying to go for. Right, and if I hit and play on the whole thing, we can see that we zoom in, and then it moves out like that. Now, what if I wanted this orange one to exist? So I'll tap U on my keyboard, like the letter U, to see how this is all working out, the animated channels, and U on this one. Right, so I can see that the first method here, right, so maybe, they're kind of growing at the same time, and then they're staying put at the same time. So I'll just try to do the same sort of animation. This section gets bigger, and maybe this section gets smaller. Right, so now they're like this portion right here of the city or something, I don't know. Right, and then I just need to get rid of these two because they were the other ones. Right, so now we have more information. And let me hit spacebar, we zoom in, it highlights out, and we can see that all shrinking and growing. Okay. You might also want to add some text labels. Right, so let's just say, let's create, since we haven't done it, let's create a line. Okay, so I'll use my pen tool again. Just going to collapse everything to make it a little bit easier to see. I'm going to click once to deselect everything, and I'm going to create a label that has this orange section. So I'll click once, maybe on the center of that, and then click once over here to create a line. Before, we created a shape that we ended where we began, but in this case, we don't want an enclosed shape, we just want a line. So I'll click once down here to make sure that that shape has been created. But what we'll notice is that it's invisible because right up here at the top, it says fill, right? What is this enclosed shape going to fill the color with? And then stroke, which is the border. And the border has this slash through it saying nothing, which makes it invisible. So let's change the fill to nothing and the stroke to a color and a weight value. So I'll click once on that word fill and say no. Now it won't have any type of fill, but it can't because it's just a stroke. I'll click once on this stroke, although I don't technically have to, and say you are going to be a solid color and give it OK. Now I can see that it has a stroke width, which I'm moving right now. I'm clicking and dragging on that number, and maybe I want it to be somewhere around 20. And I'll try to keep it the same kind of orangish color so that we can see it, but maybe make it a little bit brighter, a little bit less saturated. Well, maybe I want it to be darker because those the street color is a little odd. Yeah, you can play with color. Great. If I want to, I can also change this one to multiply. But you'll notice that it gets a little dicey because you're multiplying with everything below it. Okay, so I'll keep that to normal. Right, and then we will take that, and this can be, I'm tapping enter on my keyboard. This is my label line. Okay, and then I will create a piece of text. So click once there, and this is, I don't know, orange. Okay, I'm going to double click on that and change the color. Again, I'll have it match that. And you can change, whatever font you want. If you want it to be bold, what size do you want? Okay. And I'll switch over to the selection tool and place it here. I'm going to adjust the anchor point, and maybe I'll put that here. I can add in snapping and make sure that that snaps perfectly. And the nice thing about this is that maybe I could put it like down here like this, and then change this one. Let me change the anchor point. I'd probably do this differently, but that's okay. Let's use the tools that we have available to us. I'm just going to rotate this. So I've tapped W on my keyboard, and I'll use the scale. I don't need both of those. Well, I guess I'm actually going to do this in a different way. That's okay. So we'll just put it like that for now. Let me turn off snapping. Okay, and let's make another line segment. So I'll use my pen tool for that. So sort of in the middle. Oh, I want to make sure I'm not selecting anything. Sort of in the middle, and then just off to the side here. And that should have the same, but I'm going to just change the color and then make it a little bit darker. And this is my, what do we call it? Label line blue. And let me change this one to orange. It's important to organize your stuff, especially when you're animating. And I'll just duplicate this. So Control D on my keyboard. And I tap B on my keyboard to activate my selection tool. And I'll move this up here. I'll grab my text tool. Here comes my cat. And click once to edit this text. And type in blue. And then over here, I'll grab that same color. Okay. Same thing, I want to grab my anchor point tool and put it, just gonna try to see if I can make a animation that sort of grows out of there. This one got a little out of control, but that's okay. Let me actually put it over here. So I'm just tapping W to activate my rotation tool and moving it over there. Now she's coming from the other side. And let's move that to there. Cool. So using a combination of the anchor point tool and the selection tool to label those according to whatever you need. And of course, you can always create sort of maybe a side panel here. Let me zoom out a little bit. So maybe you have some information or something that will grab maybe this background color and then just make it a little bit brighter and a little bit less saturated, and maybe swing it in the hue a little bit over to blue, and then X out the stroke. Okay, and maybe we'll put a opacity on that one so we can kind of see through it, but it will help us with the text. So Control T on my keyboard. And I'll just click and drag to create some area text. And these are some points I want to highlight. Of course, I'll hit Control A and reduce that size. Maybe not too small. You don't want there to be too much information on the screen. But this could be something that we animate later. So I'll use that Alt trick. And we'll have that kind of come in here. I think I kind of ran out of space, but that's okay. My dog and my cat are having fun together. Oh boy. I'll get rid of these two, but I think you can see the value of using that in case you don't want these lines or something like that. So great, so let's work with this a little bit. So first off, I don't want these lines to be there until now. So I'll grab all of them. So selecting one, holding down Shift, selecting the other one, Alt and left bracket on that. And then you can do any type of animation with this one. Okay, so this could be scale, this could be location, this could be opacity. Let me do opacity because that's pretty easy. So I'll tap T on my keyboard to activate the opacity. And I'll just go forward a little bit, give that a keyframe there, go backward, and take that to 0. Oopsies. Okay, so now they're invisible and they'll start to pop up. And we can see how that might change, right? And we can also change the animation with that. So once it moves, let me get the position back. So right about here, it starts to move. And I want this to sort of move down with it. Okay, the orange one, don't really need it to move, so I'll just keep it there. But you can see the full animation here. Maybe I want that blue to move a little bit faster. So right here is when it's sort of complete. So here are my blue keyframes. So those two right there need to move faster. And maybe I would move them back a little bit. Oopsies. Maybe these two just have to be here. There you go. So you can see how I'm kind of scrubbing through it to get the overall timing. Is it tracking correctly, etc. And then tapping play. Okay. You can use icons, you can use images. So you could see in this tutorial how we took a look at a JPEG sort of as a background, but using some animation along with it, using shapes with blending modes and animation like we've covered, using text to work with that. Honestly, I would do the line here, this label line, a little bit differently, but with some of the basic animation that we're working with here, this is probably the easiest way to do it. But keep in mind that this is a shape, right? So we could go inside of here if you so do desire. So rather than using this position channel, for example, right, we could come in here with the contents. This is still a shape. It still has the path mechanism like we saw before. And I could say, you know, that it moves to about there. So position the playhead, adjust the object. I'll grab, it's hard to go over to my selection tool here. Oopsies. It's hard to grab in this capacity. Let me jump over to the path. But I could just move that one side, right, keeping that one still. And now we'll have this, you know, it's locked into place there. Or I could move that whole thing, okay, and try to sort of keep it in the middle if I wanted to do it that way. So now we'll get this sort of moving bar versus it positioning or scaling or whatever the case may be. So just a quick tutorial. I know that I was like, yes, you could do that. So I wanted to give a little bit, something a little bit more direct for you. Hope you enjoy.